The Kira case is perhaps the most complex criminal investigation in the history of fiction. Both L and Light Yagami are super geniuses, so the chess match between the two was not only peak television, but also led to a crazy hunt for the real Kira that was full of twists and turns. But today, I'm going to hand the Kira case to a different investigative team. Could the Men in Black solve the Kira case? Would they be able to bring Light Yagami to justice and wipe our memories of the Death Note murders ever even happening? Or would they all simply become more names written on the deadly pages of Light's notebook? Now, in full transparency, the main reason I thought of this matchup is because I'm not sure the Death Note could actually work on Agent J or Agent K. When you join the Men in Black, you have all traces of your past life essentially wiped from the record. Your fingertips are removed and you lose your name. So if we're operating on Light needing the birth name of either Agent J or Agent K in order to kill them, well, he's probably shit out of luck. Because finding that, even if Light does have access to police records, is going to be next to impossible. Now, it is possible to make the argument that Light could simply just write down Agent K in the notebook, and then Agent K would therefore die since that's sort of the name he uses and goes by now. But there's a few issues with this because this hypothesis can neither be confirmed nor denied. Light never tried to just write L in the Death Note to see if something like that would even work. He sort of just assumed it wouldn't work and that he would need his real and full name. So even if you assume that writing something like Agent J in the Death Note would actually work, it is very unlikely that Light would even think to do that, since he never did with L. So we do have a team that can't be killed by Light with the Death Note. This means if Light wants to win this matchup, he needs to avoid being caught. And one massive factor that would work to the detriment of Light Yagami here is that the Men in Black are not nearly as cautious as L. While L needed to be able to prove without a shadow of a doubt that Light was Kira, the MIB would not need nearly as much convincing. L, while he had the authority to use some illegal measures while conducting his investigation, still had to adhere to the law to some extent. Whereas, the Men in Black, as is stated in the first movie, report to nobody. So once they caught even just a whiff of Light potentially being their guy, they'd likely move to apprehend him with extreme prejudice. Now, the Men in Black have experience with extraterrestrial and supernatural cases, having interacted with a plethora of alien species, so I believe this would allow them to recognize the Death Note's abilities as being non-human and to search for an appropriate explanation. Rather than thinking of these string of murders as just a series of crimes, they'd very quickly understand that an object of some kind is responsible. And given the fact that they have access to and information on so many different planets and worlds, the likelihood of this organization having encountered a Death Note in the past, or at least someone who has, is extremely likely. However, just knowing of the Death Note doesn't automatically mean that the Men in Black would narrow down their search to Light Yagami. And intelligence as a sort of statistic does still lean in the favor of Light somewhat significantly. But as I previously mentioned, Light knowing that L was coming for him was a huge benefit and forced him to maneuver far more cautiously. And with the MIB, the whole purpose of that organization is to work behind the scenes, in order to keep the average citizen in the dark about their existence. So Light simply would not know that he's being hunted by this organization. So while I of course think he has superior intelligence feats to Agent J and Agent K, this matchup would be anything but a straight up chess match, like L's battle with both L and Nier were. This would be the Men in Black moving behind the scenes and piecing together clues without Light's knowledge. I kind of have to touch upon this next point just because this is a versus style matchup, but in a physical altercation it's pretty obvious that Light loses, and loses badly. He is a teenager who's fairly close to peak physical shape. However, that doesn't really matter when we start looking at the weaponry and tools at the disposal of the Men in Black. Light Yagami has no answers for a noisy cricket or a grenade that can create a black hole when it's detonated. The Death Note is powerful, but it is the equivalent of bringing a knife to an atomic bomb fight in this instance. As for how this scenario would most likely play out, now that I've discussed a lot of the inner workings and who has what advantages, I think the MIB would very quickly take notice of the Death Note murders, And understanding that locality-wise they are taking place predominantly in Japan, they'd send Agent J and Agent K to investigate, with them specifically looking for a device of some kind that is killing all of these people. These two agents would first question the police force of the Kanto region, since that's the most heavily populated region of Japan, and they'd soon realize that whoever committed these murders had to have had insider knowledge from the police department. So after they cleared all the police force members of being Kira and then proceeded to wipe all of their minds with their neuralizers, the Men in Black would start investigating family members of police officers who could possibly fit the bill. And this leads them directly to Light Yagami. Being completely honest, I just don't see a way out for Light here. Like, he can play dumb and feign ignorance while being questioned, but the Men in Black have some pretty extreme interrogation methods. Think back to the third film when Agent J was being questioned. Do you really think that Light isn't going to break under this type of pressure and just tell the truth? Light Yagami likely decides his life is more important, hands over the death note, and has his mind wiped. So not only would the Men in Black solve this case, they'd quite literally make Light forget that he was ever even Kira. This is a stomp of the highest proportions in my books. Well, if you made it this far, who do you think wins this matchup? Do you think the Men in Black would solve the Kira case, or would Light Yagami be able to escape their intergalactic justice? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to check out some of my other Versus style videos where I pit fictional detectives and criminals against one another. A playlist with all of those videos will be linked in the description. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace.